Welcome back to the Cold Case Project. Tonight, we immerse ourselves in a modern mystery. This is the case of Danielle Stislicki. Danielle Stislicki was last seen on December 2nd, 2016. It was 5 p.m., and she was leaving her place of work, MetLife, located in the 25,000 block of Telegraph Road in Southfield, Michigan. That evening, Danielle had plans to meet a friend for dinner, a casual outing that tragically never materialized. She never arrived, and from that moment on, Danielle Stislicki was never seen or heard from again. The morning after her vanishing, a critical piece of the puzzle emerged. Danielle's black 2015 Jeep Renegade, bearing the Michigan license plate number DGH 8957, was discovered back at her own apartment complex, the Independence Green Apartments, situated near Grand River Avenue and Halstead Road in Farmington Hills, Michigan. The vehicle was parked conspicuously, just 8 feet from her front door. Inside, locked away, were her purse and wallet, suggesting a departure that was anything but planned. From the outset, authorities quickly concluded that foul play was involved in Danielle's sudden disappearance. Their investigations moved swiftly. Just 18 days after she was last seen, law enforcement publicly announced that Danielle had been the victim of a crime. The grim prognosis intensified 6 months later, in July 2017, when police officially stated their belief that Danielle Stislicki had been the victim of a homicide. The focus of the investigation soon narrowed to Floyd Russell Galloway Jr., a man who had previously worked as a security guard at MetLife, Danielle's workplace. He is the last person definitively known to have been with Danielle. Authorities executed multiple search warrants at Galloway's residence in Berkeley, Michigan. Their thorough searches resulted in the seizure of numerous items, including a mattress, computers, a car, and even sections of floorboards, all believed to be potentially relevant to the case. Through their rigorous investigation into Danielle's disappearance, police were able to uncover a crucial link between Galloway and a prior sex crime. This connection led to his arrest in June 2017. Following his arrest, Galloway was officially named as a person of interest in Danielle Stislicki's case. The details of this prior crime were chilling. In September 2016, just 2 months before Danielle vanished, Galloway had attacked a 28-year-old woman who was out running in Hines Park in Livonia, Michigan. He brutally punched her, choked her, and attempted to rape her. Fortunately, in that instance, the victim managed to escape. In December 2017, Galloway pleaded guilty to a range of charges stemming from the Hines Park attack: kidnapping, criminal sexual conduct, assault with intent to commit sexual penetration, and assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder. A charge of assault with intent to murder was ultimately dropped as part of his plea agreement. He was subsequently sentenced to 16 to 35 years in prison for these crimes. Notably, the only prior criminal conviction on Floyd Galloway's record before these incidents was for drunk driving. Despite his conviction for the Hines Park attack, Galloway has consistently refused to cooperate with investigators regarding Danielle Stislicki's disappearance. He has steadfastly invoked his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, maintaining a resolute silence. Law enforcement, desperate for clues, conducted extensive searches in multiple locations linked to him, including Hines Park and Stony Park, hoping to find Danielle's body. These painstaking efforts, however, yielded no trace of her. Then, in a major development in March 2019, Floyd Russell Galloway Jr. was formally charged with premeditated first-degree murder in Danielle Stislicki's disappearance. He has pleaded not guilty to this charge and is currently awaiting trial. The circumstances surrounding Danielle's vanishing, coupled with the evidence gathered, continue to point strongly towards foul play. The prosecution of Floyd Galloway for Danielle's murder is being handled by Michigan Assistant Attorney General Jamie Horowitz. Ms. Horowitz has publicly stated that the state possesses an abundance of evidence against Galloway. This includes crucial witness statements, GPS data from Danielle's phone purportedly showing her at Galloway's house, and DNA evidence from a carpet in his home and inside his van. During a preliminary hearing, Judge James Bratt agreed that there was sufficient evidence to direct the case to circuit court. At this hearing, Danielle's mother and two of Danielle's coworkers provided compelling testimony. One coworker recounted seeing Galloway with the hood of his car raised, seemingly experiencing car trouble, with Danielle walking towards him. Another coworker testified to seeing Danielle drive out of the parking garage later that evening, with Galloway in her passenger seat. A detective who had initially questioned Galloway also took the stand, describing his demeanor as kind of standoffish. The detective noted he wouldn't look at us, kind of stared off at the wall when we were talking to him. His hands were shaking. Further key evidence was revealed by the police. Danielle's car keys and her Fitbit fitness tracker were recovered near an M5 entrance ramp, located between Danielle's apartment and a Tim Hortons restaurant. Surveillance footage from this Tim Hortons showed Galloway present at 8:38 p.m. on the night Danielle disappeared. The footage also captured Galloway using the store's public phone before being picked up by a taxi. The cab driver later confirmed dropping Galloway off at an apartment complex situated directly across from the very parking garage Danielle had allegedly driven him out of earlier that night. Police theorized that Galloway obtained a ride from Danielle after feigning car trouble. They believe she drove him to his house, where the crime against Danielle then took place. Following this, investigators suspect Galloway drove Danielle's Jeep back to her apartment, parked it, then walked from the apartment to the Tim Hortons, and finally took a cab back to retrieve his own car. This reconstruction of events, supported by the various pieces of evidence, paints a grim picture. A Michigan State forensic biologist testified that touch DNA connected to Danielle was found on carpet samples collected from the Galloway home. Based on the notable lack of blood evidence, the forensic examiner concluded that the likely cause of death was strangulation. Despite Galloway's unwavering insistence on his innocence and his refusal to disclose the location of Danielle's remains, the court determined there was indeed enough evidence to move forward with the trial. However, the prosecution's optimism for securing a conviction was significantly challenged by a recent ruling from the trial judge, which has thrown their case into disarray. On November 17, 2022, a judge decided to disallow key evidence from being presented at trial due to concerns regarding how it was obtained. This controversial decision to suppress evidence centered on claims from the defense that Galloway's attorney-client privilege had been violated, leading investigators to discover evidence they otherwise might not have found. The ruling detailed a concerning chain of events. At some point after he was named a person of interest, Galloway's lawyer advised his client to undergo a polygraph examination. This test was conducted by the defense, using an examiner they selected, and, critically, law enforcement was not involved in the process. The test was administered by James Hope, a former FBI agent with extensive experience in lie detector tests. According to court records, following this polygraph, James Hope contacted Gary Mayer, then the chief of police in Troy. Reports indicate that Hope informed Chief Mayer he was deeply disturbed by certain statements Galloway made during the polygraph and felt compelled to provide this information to law enforcement. Upon receiving this extraordinary tip, Chief Mayer then relayed the information to Chuck Nebus, the chief of the Farmington Hills Police Department. As Prosecutor Danielle Russo-Bennett explained to the judge, Chief Nebus typed up a standard form tip sheet they use in all these cases. These officers then go out to a location and recover property belonging to Miss Slisky. Acting on this information directly from the polygraph tip, investigators were able to track down and recover multiple critical pieces of evidence and obtain crucial witness statements. They located Danielle's cell phone, Fitbit, and car keys in an area situated between her apartment and a local Tim Hortons restaurant. They also found witnesses who confirmed seeing Galloway at that very Tim Hortons on the night of her disappearance. The restaurant, described as being no more than a 10-minute walk from Danielle's apartment, informed investigators that Galloway had purchased a coffee and used their pay phone that night. A taxi driver later corroborated this, confirming that at approximately 9 p.m., he picked up Galloway from the Tim Hortons parking lot and drove him to his destination, an apartment complex less than 1,000 feet from where Danielle was last seen alive. Police obtained statements from both the Tim Hortons witnesses and the cab driver. They also requested and were given surveillance footage and phone record from that night, along with forensic data from Danielle's cell phone and surveillance footage from a gas station near the Tim Hortons. While this extensive collection of evidence helped break the case open for detectives, the judge's ruling determined that it was only obtainable through what was deemed a flagrant violation of Galloway's civil rights. In a blistering statement, Judge McMillan explained her decision, saying, "Police intentionally intruded on the privileged relationship and used the information to locate and seize evidence. The court finds the actions of the government were outrageous. As a direct consequence of this ruling, none of the evidence derived from Danielle's cell phone is admissible. The surveillance footage from Tim Hortons is inadmissible. Evidence of the cab ride is inadmissible. None of the witness sightings from that night are inadmissible, and none of the phone records are inadmissible. This is undeniably a powerful blow to the prosecution's case, especially considering that despite countless searches over the past 7 years, Danielle's remains have never been found. Further complicating the prosecution's efforts, another ruling by the judge on February 5, 2021, stipulated that the prosecution will not be allowed to introduce information at trial about Galloway's previous attack on the jogger in Hines Park, nor his guilty plea for that crime. The judge determined that this information, brought up by the prosecution to show a pattern of violent and sexually motivated behavior, lacked striking similarities to Danielle's disappearance. This means all details about his arrest, crime, plea, and sentence for that incident are barred from the murder trial. Danielle's mother, and Richards, has publicly expressed the family's profound frustration and disappointment with these rulings. She told local news, "Our family is disappointed on these results and will continue to support the judicial appeal process in effort for the true story to be told." The public should also be aware that Floyd is currently in prison for sexually attacking a jogger that was fortunate to escape just 3 months before Danielle went missing. Recent reports indicate that the prosecution is attempting to appeal these significant evidentiary rulings. Regardless of the outcome of those appeals, the trial for Danielle Stislicky's murder will proceed. We can only hope that if Floyd Galloway is indeed responsible for Danielle's disappearance and likely murder, there will be sufficient admissible evidence to prove it to a jury. It is incredibly important for law enforcement to receive any information that can assist them in this ongoing investigation. The more details they have, the greater the chances of seeing justice served and, hopefully, locating Danielle. Danielle's family has endured years of anguish, not knowing their daughter's fate, unable to lay her to rest. And now, they face the agonizing possibility that the man they believe responsible might walk free. If you are interested in finding more information about the disappearance of Danielle Stislicky, her family has created a website, finddan.org, which provides extensive information. There's also a dedicated Facebook page, Find Danielle Stislicky. If you have any information, even the smallest detail, please contact the Farmington Hills Police Department or the FBI. You can show your support for Danielle and her family by using the hashtag #FindDanny on social media. What do you believe happened to Danielle?
Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
Next, we uncover a story of a woman who vanished, a husband's dark secret, and a daughter's fractured memory. It's a case where the truth, though confessed, remains incomplete, leaving behind a family longing for closure. This is the tragic disappearance of Christine Smith. It was September 28, 1994, when Christine Smith was last seen in Portage, Michigan. Her husband, Russell Smith, offered a seemingly straightforward explanation. He claimed Christine had left voluntarily, abandoning her life with another man. To back up his story, he even showed people a note, which he insisted Christine herself had written, providing an explanation for her sudden departure. However, Christine's loved ones found Russell's account difficult to swallow. They simply couldn't believe that Christine would willingly abandon her 7-year-old daughter, the very heart of her world. This disbelief planted the first seeds of doubt in what Russell presented as a clear-cut case of a woman leaving her marriage. Initially, police also leaned towards the theory that Christine had indeed left Russell. But their perspective began to shift when Russell's behavior became suspicious. He refused to allow investigators to search his home and, crucially, would not permit them to speak with his daughter alone. These actions raised red flags, suggesting that Russell had something to hide beyond a simple marital separation. In late 1994, authorities secured a warrant, finally gaining access to the Smith residence. While they found no immediate physical evidence directly linking Russell to Christine's murder, their search did uncover other troubling discoveries. These findings led them to charge Russell with embezzlement from his employer, an unexpected turn in the unfolding investigation. At this critical juncture, a more disturbing layer of the family's life came to light. Evidence surfaced suggesting that Russell might have been molesting his own daughter. As a result, the girl was removed from the home, and though Russell was never formally charged in connection with these allegations, she was eventually adopted by his parents and never lived with him again. It was during this period that the daughter provided crucial details to the police. She recalled that her parents had a heated argument on the very day Christine disappeared. Even more chilling, she told investigators she had found blood in the upstairs bathroom, a room Russell subsequently remodeled later that same year. The truth about Christine's fate would finally emerge years later. In 1998, Russell Smith pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in connection with Christine's case. In a chilling confession, he recounted the events of that fateful day. He stated that after they had put their child on the school bus, he and Christine began to argue. During the altercation, Christine threatened to leave him, taking their daughter with her. Russell then admitted to shooting Christine to death. Following the horrific act, he placed her body inside a storage barrel and disposed of it by throwing the barrel into Lake Erie, which is located approximately 9 miles from their residence. During his confession, Russell maintained that he was driven to kill her by what he perceived as her selfishness, her mean demeanor, and frequent affairs with other men. However, investigators could find no evidence whatsoever to support his claims that Christine had ever been unfaithful during their marriage. As part of his plea agreement, Russell agreed to assist detectives in finding Christine's body. Extensive searches of Lake Erie were conducted, employing various techniques and resources. Yet, despite these efforts and Russell's supposed cooperation, the vast waters of the lake yielded nothing. Christine's remains have never been found. For his crime, Russell Smith was sentenced to 35 to 70 years in prison for his wife's murder. While a measure of justice was served with his conviction, the absence of Christine's physical remains leaves an indelible void. Her family knows her fate, but cannot lay her to rest. The cold, dark waters of Lake Erie hold a secret that, even with a confession, remains stubbornly hidden. Let's delve into a puzzling disappearance from the late 1970s, a case marked by sudden behavioral shifts, an unusual farewell, an enduring question about a young man's fate. This is the story of Jeffrey Stinette. Jeffrey Stinette's mother last saw her son on January 15, 1978. At that time, Jeffrey lived in an apartment situated near the bustling University of Michigan campus. However, it wasn't until months later, on April 19, 1978, that a missing person report was officially filed. The individual who shared his living space made the report, stating that Jeffrey had not been seen for approximately 7 days prior to that date. When he vanished, Jeffrey left behind all his personal belongings, and he has never been heard from again since. Prior to his disappearance, Jeffrey Stinette had made a significant life change. He had quit his job. Described as a young man with a diverse range of interests, Jeffrey had played tennis during his high school years. He was also known for his creative pursuits, writing poetry and engaging in the popular role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons. His intellectual curiosity extended to languages, as he held an interest in French. Compounding these details, there's also information suggesting he may have been experimenting with the hallucinogenic substance, LSD. A particularly concerning detail comes from his sister, who recalled Jeffrey acting strangely when he visited his family over the Christmas holidays in 1977. During that visit, Jeffrey made a perplexing statement, claiming that angels had driven him to his mother's home. Furthermore, he began giving away cherished albums and books he owned, asserting that he no longer needed them. These behaviors were highly out of character, raising alarm bells for his family. His mother, grappling with the profound mystery of his disappearance, speculated that Jeffrey might have joined a religious cult after he vanished. This theory, born from his unusual statements and actions, was one attempt to comprehend his sudden and complete absence. Jeffrey's sister, however, holds a different, more somber belief. She is convinced that he is deceased, reasoning that he would not have gone this long without making contact with his family, given their bond. The silence that has stretched over decades speaks volumes to her. To this day, Jeffrey Stinette's case remains unsolved. The reasons for his sudden departure, or what ultimately befell him, are still unknown. Was his strange behavior a precursor to a deliberate break from his past, or a sign of something more sinister? The lack of any trace, combined with the initial delay in reporting his absence, leaves a vast void in the narrative. 47 years later, the question of what truly happened to Jeffrey Stinette lingers, a cold case waiting for a new lead to break through the silence. Next, we explore a disappearance where the last person seen with the missing individual took his own life before critical questions could be answered. It's a story of domestic strife, a troubled past, and a family's belief in foul play. This is the case of Tonia Stiles. Tonia Stiles was last seen on November 18, 2010, at her home on Orban Road in Grass Lake, Michigan. At the time, she resided there with her boyfriend, Scott Stephen Cassidy, and a male roommate. The roommate told investigators that he had fallen asleep on the couch. When he awoke about an hour later, Tonia was no longer there. She has never been heard from again, and notably, she left all of her personal belongings behind at the residence. Scott Stephen Cassidy and Tonia had shared the home for approximately a year and a half prior to her disappearance. Cassidy operated a tree service business directly from his property. This living arrangement, and the individuals within it, became central to the unfolding mystery. Just 6 days after Tonia vanished, on November 24th, Scott Cassidy was charged with auto theft. He was accused of stealing a van from the Comtronic Security Company in Jackson, Michigan. This wasn't Cassidy's first brush with the law. At the time of this charge, he was already on probation for various drug and weapons-related offenses. His criminal record also included a 1997 conviction for home invasion. Then, in a tragic and complicating turn of events on December 3rd, Scott Cassidy was found dead in jail, having taken his own life by hanging. The exact relationship between his suicide and Tonia Stiles' disappearance remains unclear. However, he was indisputably one of the last known people to have seen her alive. Police had already interviewed him about her vanishing and had plans to question him further regarding the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Despite this, he was never officially named as a suspect in her case, a detail that now complicates any further investigation. Tonia Stiles' own past was marked by early challenges. As a child, she was in foster care before being adopted at the age of 9. She was a mother herself, with 2 children from prior relationships, and had divorced her husband in 2009. At the time of her disappearance, Tonia was unemployed and lacked a cellular phone or a car, which would have made independent travel difficult. She and Cassidy were reportedly experiencing financial problems, and they had apparently argued on the night she went missing. While Tonia had expressed dissatisfaction with her life and had even talked about leaving, her loved ones firmly believe she would never have abandoned her children. This conviction is shared by law enforcement. Both her family and the police agree that Tonia most likely met with foul play. Her case remains chillingly unsolved, a lingering question mark in Grass Lake, Michigan. The death of Scott Cassidy, the last known person to see Tonia, extinguished a crucial pathway for investigators. Without his testimony, many questions about that night may never be answered. The Michigan State Police, Jackson Post, continues to investigate the disappearance of Tonia Stiles. Any information, no matter how small, could be vital. They can be reached at 517-780-4580. Welcome to the Cold Case Project. Tonight, we delve into a case that has haunted a community for over a decade, a story of 3 young boys who vanished without a trace, leaving behind a bewildered family and unanswered questions. It's a mystery steeped in a bitter custody dispute, a father's shifting narrative, and a chilling void where 3 vibrant lives once were. This is the story of Alexander, Andrew, and Tanner Skelton. On a crisp November day in 2010, the lives of a Michigan family were irrevocably shattered. Tonia Lynn Zuver Skelton, a mother who had recently filed for divorce from her husband, John Russell Skelton, had been granted custody of her 3 young sons. As Thanksgiving approached, it was a court-ordered visitation that would mark the last confirmed sighting of the boys by anyone other than their father. The last time Alexander, Andrew, and Tanner were definitively seen alive by anyone besides their father was at 5 p.m. on November 25, 2010. This was the day before their disappearances would send shockwaves across the state and beyond. John Skelton had picked them up for what should have been a routine holiday visit, but the boys never returned home. When questioned, John Skelton offered a startling and, as authorities would soon determine, highly improbable account of their whereabouts. He claimed he had handed his sons over to a woman named Joan Taylor, whom he asserted he had met online several years prior. His explanation for this unusual arrangement was chilling. He stated he was planning to end his own life and didn't want his children to witness such a traumatic event. He then claimed Joanne was married to a pastor named Mark, drove a white or silver minivan, and lived in either Hillsdale or Jackson County, Michigan. Later that same day, John Skelton did indeed attempt to take his own life, though he survived and was subsequently hospitalized, first in a general facility and then transferred to a psychiatric institution in Ohio. Meanwhile, the alarm bells were ringing. Authorities swiftly issued an Amber Alert for the Skelton brothers, initiating an urgent search that would yield no sign of the children, nor any credible evidence that a Joan Taylor or her supposed husband, Mark, even existed. Police quickly voiced their grave concerns, stating they believed the boys were in grave danger. They openly expressed their conviction that John's story about Joan Taylor was a fabrication, a desperate attempt to conceal a far more sinister truth. Investigators pivoted, approaching the disappearances as homicides, with John Skelton immediately identified as the prime suspect. Critical evidence emerged. Investigators confirmed that John Skelton's blue Dodge Caravan, bearing Michigan license plate number 9, JQH93, was active on the Ohio Turnpike, precisely along the Michigan-Ohio border, between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. on November 26th. They urgently appealed to the public for any witnesses who might have seen this distinctive vehicle during those crucial early morning hours. Upon his release from the hospital, the legal consequences for John Skelton were immediate and severe. He was arrested and held under suicide watch, eventually extradited to Michigan. The charges mounted: 3 counts of felony parental kidnapping, 3 counts of general kidnapping, and 3 counts of false imprisonment. At a court hearing in December 2010, John Skelton's narrative shifted once more. He recanted his story about Joe and Taylor, instead claiming his sons were in the care of an organization that he initially refused to name. He later identified this supposed group as United Foster Outreach and Underground Sanctuaries. Law enforcement, however, found no evidence that such an organization existed. This further solidified their belief that John was withholding the truth. The family dynamics leading up to this tragedy were complex. Tonia and John had married in 2002, and their family was active within the United Methodist Church in Morenci. Both John and Tonia had children from previous marriages, with John having one adult daughter and Tonia having 2 daughters. The marital discord escalated in mid-September 2010, when John unilaterally withdrew Andrew and Alexander from school and took them to Florida without Tonia's permission. He informed their school they were on vacation, but also implied they might not return, suggesting the school forward their records. This forced Tonia to travel to Florida, where she had to involve local authorities to compel John, under threat of arrest, to return the boys to Michigan. It was immediately after their return that Tonia filed for divorce. She later stated her motivation was not to end their marriage, but to legally secure custody and prevent John from absconding with the children again. She maintained that she and John were in counseling, hopeful for a reconciliation, and that the children had been visiting John regularly without any reported issues. John Skelton's professional life had also taken a downer. He had previously worked as a long-haul truck driver, a profession that often involves significant time away from home. However, in 2009, he was fired after a conviction for drunk driving, rendering him unemployed ever since. This period of unemployment coincided with the increasingly bitter custody battle that was unfolding between him and Tonia. Adding another layer of complexity to the custody dispute was Tonia's past. She had, at one time, been a registered S offender, having pleaded guilty to misdemeanor 4th-degree criminal conduct against a 14-year-old neighbor boy in 1998, when she was 32 years old. In response to Tonia's divorce filing, John had petitioned the court to sever her parental rights based on this status. However, the judge refused. After the children's disappearance, John claimed he feared Tonia was abusing them, but investigators found no evidence to support these allegations. Tonia, in turn, reported that when she visited their former family home, where John had been living at the time of the disappearances, many items inside the house had been deliberately destroyed. In July 2011, John Skelton entered into a plea agreement with prosecutors. He pleaded no contest to 3 counts of false imprisonment. The more severe kidnapping charges, which could have led to a life sentence, were dropped. He was instead sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison, a term that actually exceeded the state's sentencing guidelines for the charges he pleaded to. Even after this conviction, John Skelton has continued to assert that his children are still alive, but emphatically states they will never be returned as long as their mother retains custody of them. In a heartbreaking development in March 2025, a judge officially declared the 3 Skelton brothers to be legally deceased, effective 5 years after their disappearance. However, the court also ruled that there was insufficient evidence to definitively prove they had been murdered, a distinction that leaves a difficult emotional chasm for their family. Alexander, Andrew, and Tanner were all students at Morenci Elementary School when they vanished. Alexander was in 3rd grade, Andrew in 1st, and Tanner in kindergarten. Their cases remain tragically unsolved, and foul play is still strongly suspected. The investigating agency for this enduring mystery is the Morenci Police Department, who can be reached at 517-458-7104. The geographical context of this case is significant. As experts have noted, the area along the Ohio and Indiana border, where John Skelton's phone activity was traced on Black Friday, hours after the boys were last confirmed alive, is known as the Holiday City area. This region, rich with farms and sprawling landscapes, offers numerous places where something could be concealed. Yet, it also sits remarkably close to Interstate 80, raising questions about a potential handoff or rendezvous. The continued silence from John Skelton, who remains imprisoned, is a profound source of pain and frustration. Many, including legal professionals and advocates, believe his refusal to cooperate is a calculated act to further punish his ex-wife, Tonia. The prospect of his release from prison, which is slated for November 29, 2025, looms large over this cold case. He has served his maximum sentence for unlawful imprisonment for each child, but has not been paroled, indicating his continued lack of cooperation. The question that weighs heavily on investigators and the public alike is, will John Skelton ever be charged with murder? We've seen numerous cases where murder charges are filed, and even convictions secured, without the recovery of a victim's body. Legal experts weigh in on the challenges and possibilities. While grand juries are less common in Michigan, the hope persists that an inmate he's been housed with might come forward with a confession, a common occurrence in high-profile cases. The immense national attention on the Skelton case means anyone in prison with John would undoubtedly be aware of the reward and potential for a reduced sentence for information leading to the boys' bodies. The consensus is that his potential media appearances post-release could be pivotal. If he chooses to write a book, go on a podcast, or speak publicly, he might inadvertently reveal crucial details that could lead investigators to new search areas, new leads, or even provide the breakthrough needed for homicide charges. However, the grim reality is that even if remains are found after so many years, their decayed state might make it incredibly difficult to determine the cause of death or definitively link it back to him. Despite the challenges, many argue that prosecutors should prioritize bringing murder charges. As one legal expert passionately stated, "Don't look at reasons not to bring these charges, Rick. Look at reasons to bring these charges." The argument is that the interest of justice demands it, setting a precedent, particularly in cases where a parent with custody of their children vanishes with them, and the remaining parent has repeatedly lied. This isn't just about this one case. It's about establishing a clear message for similar future tragedies. The fact that Tonia, despite her past, was granted full custody speaks volumes about the judge's assessment of the situation. And John's motive, according to this perspective, was clear: if I can't have them, no one can. This suggests a calculated, deliberate act. John Skelton's character, described by some as selfish and stubborn, has been a barrier to the truth. He has served years in prison, yet he continues to hold the key to what happened to Tanner, Alexander, and Andrew. John Skelton will be released in November 2025, and whether he will ever reveal the truth remains the agonizing question for a family that has waited far too long for answers. We encourage anyone with any information, no matter how small, to contact the Morenci Police Department.